Good evening. This is Debra V. Wilson. It's Friday, the 17th of November, 2017. The time is 2000 hours and 7 minutes, and that's GMT minus 6. This podcast I'm going to call Observations in Winnipeg of Others and Self. It's going to be a bit of a ramble, and it will include a bit more than just Winnipeg, be more expansive than Winnipeg. Uh, Approximately a year ago, I did a video, a podcast about Winnipeg, some experiences I've observed. It was September of 2016. So this is now a year and 2 months later, and I've had an experience today in which I observed a fellow Winnipegger and that person's reaction to a situation. And then I observed my own, and later in the day, my own reaction to a situation. So I'll just start. I was on the bus this today, and a man got on the bus. He was clearly inebriated. He also, at the same time, appeared to be in pain. Uh, he was on the wrong bus, and the driver kept trying to explain to him that he was on the wrong bus. But it did seem like he was in pain in addition to being under the influence of something. So he never, it didn't appear to register with him. And apparently he wanted to go to a hospital, and the bus driver said, "This bus doesn't go there." And he told him the bus, "You're on the wrong bus." He kept saying, "You're on the wrong bus, you're on the wrong bus." The man sat down after nearly falling on another passenger. He was staggering and holding on to his side, his right side. So the bus just sat there. A couple of people got off the bus because they had someplace else to be. The driver asked the passenger several times, once, even after he was seated, "What do you want to do? Because this bus doesn't go to that hospital." Another passenger stood up, a man, and volunteered to take him off the bus and walk him to the bus stop and ride with him to the hospital. A total stranger, because at first we didn't understand that that's what the exchange between the two men, the man who was in distress and the man who assisted him, the other passenger who assisted him, until the driver said, "Do you want me to wait for you when you go? Wait for you and you just take him across the street to that bus stop, and that'll take him to the hospital. And I can just wait for you if you want me to." And the man said, "No, I'm going to go all the way to the hospital." "Well, I'm going to take him to the hospital." So we were, it was downtown Winnipeg. There's always a lot of traffic during the weekday. And the bus driver watched, and as we all did, as the helper, helped the struggling man off the bus. And you could hear him, because the door was still open, saying, "I'm going with you, I'm going with you. Come on, come on." And he was literally helping him walk. The journey continued on. I got off the bus a few stops later, and I was making my way to my destination when I heard a rather intense argument between a man and a woman. They were standing next to a school, and the woman was at one point screaming and using expletives and saying that she didn't want anything to do with him. "Leave her alone, leave her alone." Well, I stood there and watched, and then she must have said something to him, because she looked at him, and my impression was she must have said something like, "Well, someone's watching, there's a witness," and that witness was me. And he turned around and he looked and he said something, not to me but to her, and he literally waved his hand at me, that he didn't care that I was watching. They were both in their 30s. I'm 60 years old. It's the bus stop, around the bus stop, is very icy, and at the best of times, my balance is challenged. I don't do well on icy spaces, and I remember thinking, that young man is half my age. What am I going to do? I thought, I was so concerned, honestly, about the fact that he had seen me, and he seemed a bit annoyed that I had the audacity to stand there and be concerned about the situation. So I thought the best thing was to walk away and make a phone call, but every space I took, there was more, I was worried about my balance. So finally I got to a smooth place in the road on this particular street, and wouldn't you know, a Winnipeg police car parked. And I thought the police officer was going to the incident, so I made my way to him. I remember thinking in my head I must look like a penguin because I was trying to keep my balance. And I waved at him, and I think he thought I was waving at him, and he waved back and he smiled. And I thought, I thought it was nice, actually. There's no sarcasm. I thought, oh, well, that's nice. He looked like, and then the closer I got, I waved again because I didn't want to just abruptly walk up to a squad car. And he rolled down his window, and I said, I need to ask you about something. And I told him about the incident. I asked him if he had come by and seen the incident. He said no, he had come from the other direction. He was working on doing something with his paperwork, working on his paperwork. And I wasn't very good at explaining where it was, but because I told him I'm not from Winnipeg. And in addition, I have a bad sense of direction, although I didn't mention that. But I knew the intersecting streets, and I don't even remember if I told them they were in an alley. But she seemed to be in distress. And I'm going on, and I'm apologizing because I'm not being as lucid and as clear and precise. And he said, don't worry about it. He said, I'll go take a look at it and make sure everything is okay. So I'm in the streets talking to him because he is on the driver's side, and so he starts up his car and he waits, his squad car, and he waits for me to get back on the sidewalk, and I'm doing the penguin thing, and he goes to the middle of the street and turns his vehicle around, and he goes toward the incident that I saw. I don't even know if the couple was still there. Anyway, what it made me think about is how we connect to a space, and when, if ever, we feel responsible for, when does the other become our fellow citizens? When do we decide, I'm not new in a space, I self-define now as a Canadian. And that's important for me emotionally and psychologically. It's important for me to define as a Canadian now for a multitude of reasons. And if you go back into some of my older podcasts, you might get a sense of why I feel that way. I think I would have always helped. I've always been that person that steps forward and helps. But today I felt something different that I haven't felt in a long time. I'm a part of this. I bore witness to this woman who was afraid, and I could not do something. And so even though I'm not good at directions, I'm horrific, I was afraid to go across the street because of the ice. I recognized that I felt connected to not just Winnipeg, but Canada in ways now that I don't know if I felt that way last year. And then to go back earlier in the day, the man on the bus certainly must not have planned to take someone to the hospital that he didn't know. They didn't know each other. But this man, and I don't know anything about either man, the man in distress or the man who aided him. I don't know anything about either one of them. But there was something that propelled this man not to be an observer, but to get involved and help his fellow citizen, his fellow Winnipegger. So in terms of my research, I always wonder what that thing is that makes people say, no, I can't just be an observer. I can't just bear witness. I have to participate. I have to engage, particularly when I see my fellow, not the other, not someone else, not that intoxicated man who may or may not have something else going on, not that, well, I don't know them, the man she was with is half my age, is taller than me, and dear God, he was already annoyed that I had the quote-unquote audacity to even bear witness to what was happening to them. And what that sense of connection and belonging, how that impacts collective security and sense of well-being for all. And then in addition to that, I didn't know what to say to the police officer. It's the first time I've engaged with law enforcement here in such a manner. I have engaged with law enforcement here around questions of about my research and what I'm hoping to learn about, not just Winnipeg, but Canada in general. But to not know what to say and how to say it, and the police officer stepping up and leaning in and saying, okay, in essence, I understand there's a need, and I'll go take a look at it. And he took off. And what that does to me, so what that experience with the police officer does to me in terms of my experience here in Winnipeg, and now as a person who defines as a Canadian, and that his receptiveness and his responsiveness and what that does to me in terms of how I feel a part of and connected to Canada and Winnipeg, and what that does for for my sense of security, my sense of belonging, and my sense of connected to my fellow citizens, residents, neighbors, total strangers. Observing the situation with the man on the bus who stepped forward and got involved, what that does to each of us that sat there and observed this stranger responding to another human being's need and stepping up and out of self and saying, I'll help. And what that does to our sense of connectedness with each other, even if we were not directly in need of help, but the knowledge that there are people like this man, the knowledge that we are connected and we do bear some kind of responsibility for each other, and that responsibility for each other helps collectively ensure and facilitate a sense of security. I did say this was going to be a rambling one. So as I continue with my research and I use these podcasts to give examples of engagement with each other, whether that be from bottom up civilians, civil society to the state, or top down state to the civil sector, or any other combination, state to state, civil societies to civil societies, communities to communities. I think at the heart of it, what I'm trying to understand is how we facilitate, encourage, or discourage our security. What is security? How do we feel safe? What ways in which, what do our actions do to encourage a sense of security, to encourage actual security, and what things are an anathema to collective security? I want this video to be, this podcast to be exactly what it is, a stream of consciousness, because it is actually something I'm working through. The sense, the feeling that I felt watching the man on the bus, the feeling I felt, the fear, this man half my age, I'm a 60-year-old woman, and the fear I felt when this man turned and looked at me in anger because I was bearing witness to this frightened woman that he was screaming at and wouldn't leave alone. And that mixture of fear as I walked away, fear that I might be harmed in some way from that incident, fear, my own personal fear about my lack of balance on the ice, and then seeing the police officer and not knowing how to explain to him that I wanted him to do something, but I didn't even know what I wanted him to do. And then his response to me and what that did for me in my terms of my sense of not only security for myself, but that even if that couple left, that the police officer heard me and was responsive. I said this was going to be a bit of a ramble. It is a bit of a ramble. It's a stream of consciousness. But now and forever, I am always focused on what is security, how we define security, what do we do to facilitate security, what's an anathema to security, what role the state plays, and what role do we as civil society play in our interactions with the state and then with each other. This is Debra V. Wilson, and well, I'm in Winnipeg because that's what this podcast was about. Thank you very much.